Short introduction.
So shall I kick off to get everyone in their comfort zone?
Yeah.
My name's Jana. You feel free to pronounce it however you do. I enjoy all the variety. Same with pronouns. And I'm in South Africa, and I'm here to support this session so that we can connect in a spirit of solidarity and mutual respect. And I'm going to cheat slightly before the next person introduces and propose that we just take a few seconds to breathe, because anybody who's coming to this session is very brave, even if you've just come in to watch. This is a session that's likely to be quite challenging, quite triggering. And I'm just very grateful that I know that all of the participants are here in a beautiful collaborative spirit. And welcome everybody. Who'd like to introduce themselves next?
I'll nominate myself to go next. Good evening, everybody, or whatever it is, where in your part of the world. I'm Andrew Spate. I'm 18 years old. My pronouns are he and him. I'm in Blackpool, United Kingdom. I'm the Member of Youth Parliament for Blackpool and Chair of Blackpool Youth Council. And I've done a lot of work in the UK in regards to reforming education, alternative education. It's an honour to be here.
Great, thank you, Andrew.
I can go next. Hello, everyone. My name is Leyla. I am 29 years old and I'm from Turkey, Istanbul. Currently, I'm still doing a research about democratic education. It's been a year. I'm an individual member of European Democratic Education Community. I'm happy to be here and nice to see you. Thank you.
I guess I'll go next then. Hi everyone, I'm Christy. I'm 25 this year, I think. I'm from Malaysia. I am a researcher for a self-directed learning school in Malaysia as well as a play school in Malaysia. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Yolene. Do you hear me?
Yeah. Beautifully.
My name is Yolene. Yeah, thank you. I am 36 years old. I'm French and I'm currently living in London. I work in schools and I'm interested in democratic education, self-directed learning, free schools. I have a daughter and I can be called he or she or her. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
And
okay, I'll go. I am Neil. I'm currently 17 years old and I live in Cape Town, South Africa. I'm currently doing my GED. So that's kind of where I got into self-directed education. Yeah, and my pronouns are he and him. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Great to have you here, Neil.
And I'm Greg. I am from Austin, Texas. I've lived in the United States my whole life. And I'm 49 years old. I've experimented with all kinds of different homeschooling, unschooling groups, and my 4 kids go to a Sudbury school here, and if I'm lucky, they'll vote me in to be staff this year.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Ahmed from Egypt. My pronouns are he or him. So I've changed school multiple times, tried different schooling system from religious schools to public Egyptian schools to STEM schools, and currently I'm in traveling high school. So I'm not an education expert, but I've been in the process of being in almost all system schools. So Yeah, and I'm interested in STEM education and cultural experience, and it's very great to be here today.
Great.
So I think I'm the only one missing. My name is Silva. I live in Spain/Germany. I'm 18 and I really want people to be able to go to schools other than traditional school. And yeah, that's it.
Great. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen for 6 minutes for a bit of an introduction to the topic, having a look at why are we even here? What are we discussing? Does it make any sense to even be talking about using these words in this way? And please hang in there through the video, both sides. I think there's probably a lot more sides to this topic, but both will be represented by the end. And then after that, Salva will take us briefly through how it's going to work. And then after that, I'll go back to holding the space for all of the participants to share their insights and their perspectives. I would just like to encourage everybody to have a multi-partial attitude. The way I usually describe that to people is I say, okay, who is directly to your left on your screen? Let's just have 3 people say who is directly to your left on your screen. Anybody?
Leila.
Popcorn. Leila. Who's directly to someone else's left on the screen?
Nobody.
Nobody. It's empty, right? Somebody else?
Yeah, that's the same as me. Nobody. I'm on the furthest left possible.
Right. So we've got 2 people saying that they have nobody next to them. Leila must be wrong. No. All of us have our own perspective. So let's bear that in mind, that each person's truth is their truth, and we're here to actually encounter and put a bigger picture together from all of our perspectives. So with that said, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, here we go. In ancient Greece, some slaves were comfortable middle-class shop managers. Others were valued members of the family household, while yet others experienced horrifically brutal conditions of life and death akin to what most transatlantic African slaves experienced. Currently, in Uzbekistan, child and adult citizens are forced against their will to pick cotton for 2 months each year, and this qualifies as a form of modern slavery. What these vastly different forms of slavery have in common is that labor is coerced for the benefit of the coercer, with this oppressive relationship sanctioned by the law of the land. Some youth and adults involved in the education revolution see coercive education as a form of modern-day slavery. Children are coerced, forced to work against their will, and lose their whole childhoods. But is this exploitation rather than for their own good? A highly benignant, benign and kindly, elevating and humanizing institution was what slave owners once claimed about slavery, so that they could keep benefiting without guilt. Do teachers and principals like this one truly believe that coercion is for the good of the child?
You have to have graduation credits in courses that you don't need, that you'll never use, that you don't care about. We should be in an application-based learning environment, not a read, record, and regurgitate learning environment. It won't change because here's why. If you do away with this system, this is like an industry right now. If you do away with this system, you don't need this $100 million building. You don't need a $100 million building. You don't need 210 staff members. You don't need 103 teachers. You don't need 5 assistant principals. Heck, you may not even need a principal. You don't need all these people. You don't need these buildings. And you don't need the textbooks. You don't need all of this. And there are too many people with too many interests tied up in this. There are teachers unions. There are principal unions. There are support staff unions that will fight tooth and nail to keep every last job in a schoolhouse even when they're unnecessary, just to protect their own interests. There are construction companies. There are people in local government who rely on development and rely on these buildings and rely on the reputation of a school to have houses built. Okay, there are textbook companies. Pearson, for example, is one that has almost a monopoly on many of our educational resources and textbooks. Like, there is an industry behind this. There are people that are tied up in local and national government who have money into this system.
And then finally, the Sudbury model. I like it because where liberal arts works really well to free the mind, the Sudbury model, I feel, frees the whole being. Tell old Pharaoh, let my people go. When I went to go see Harriet Tubman, anybody seen that, Harriet? I walked out of there on fire. I said, that's my calling. I am freeing the slaves from the plantation of traditional education. When we don't have more liberated educational philosophies for for every child, actually, but especially for African American children, we keep them on the plantation. Thank you.
The principle of slavery still pervades pedagogy, and therefore the same principle pervades the school, said Maria Montessori, who also said, how can we expect democracy when we have reared slaves? Assata Shakur said that people get used to anything. The less you think about your oppression, the more your tolerance for it grows. After a while, people just think oppression is the normal state of things. But to become free, you have to be acutely aware of being a slave. And those who do not move do not notice their chains. Because of all this, adults telling youth not to use these words can be experienced as a form of gaslighting, in that the direct experience of the young person is trivialized and or denied, possibly even sapping the confidence they need in order to bring about their individual and collective liberation. The range of experiences in coercive education is as wide as the range of slavery in ancient Greece.
On the other hand, most people will not have any of that in mind when they see the phrase school slavery. They might very fairly assume sick horror, opportunistic hyperbole, or worse. For the descendants of transatlantic slaves who to this day deal with the oppressions of systemic racism, which includes constant systemic level denial of their oppressive experience, using these words in this way can also feel trivializing, a form of gaslighting about the level of harshness and injustice experienced by their ancestors. Ironically, it could even be seen as yet another disrespectful and insensitive form of cultural appropriation. There are people for whom this topic is so sensitive that they feel we shouldn't be even tackling this session today. But that is also why we must. This difference of experience has the potential to divide the education revolution, alienating and marginalizing individuals from both groups. Solidarity is our aim. Liberation is not real unless it includes everyone. That is why we have come together today, not to debate or argue or push for a false consensus, but to express and listen and honor the complexity of this issue with the aim of finding at least the beginnings of a genuinely inclusive way forward.
Another deep breath, and over to Salva to explain now the technicalities of what's going to happen next.
Okay, hi. So now we're gonna have 5 rounds where we're gonna discuss a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna show you wait, the rounds, how the rounds will look like. Share screen here. So the first round will be like the statement. Each one of us has a statement prepared and we're just gonna read it or say it, whatever. The second round will be asking questions in case we didn't get something from someone else. And the third round will be just saying how the other people's perspective change our mind. And the fourth round will be consent. I'm going to explain that one. And the fifth round, we will look for new solutions or just some things or find new wording. Okay, I'm going to show you right now another what's consent. Okay. So in sociocracy, consent means not only your preference, but also something that is in your range of tolerance. I'm gonna give you an example so you get it better. So for example, tonight I'm gonna go to a restaurant and I want a vegan burger. That's what I want. But then I go there and they tell me, we don't have that. Would you like some beef? And I'm like, hey, I'm vegan. I don't need that. And that would be here, like in the objection, it would be outside of the consent circle because I don't need that. But then they tell me, would you like a salad? And I'm like, yes. I mean, it's not what I wanted to have for dinner, but I could have that. That's okay. So that would be in my range of tolerance, and that's also consent. Meaning consent is not only what, like your preference, like what's your favorite, but also that you something that you accept and that's okay for you. Do you have any questions? Because I know this is kind of complicated sometimes. Okay, so I guess you don't have any questions. So we're gonna go ahead and start with the first round, which is the statement.
So I'm going to suggest that on this first round, maybe each person can decide when they're ready to go, but then I'm going to record that order, and then we're going to keep that same order for all of the rounds. There won't be any interrupting, any crosstalk, or any change of that order. If you want to respond or ask something, you can just make a note of it so that when it's your turn, you still have your notes to use. Who would like to make the first statement about this? Andrew, please go for it.
Thank you very much. The definition of slavery in the Cambridge English Dictionary is the activity of legally owning other people who are forced to work for or obey you. Due to neither the school nor the state actually owning the pupils in law, we therefore cannot say that conventional education is slavery. My conclusion is that it may therefore be wrong to use the term slavery to describe conventional education, especially with the sensitive history around the word being considered. However, if we refer back to their same definition, although we can't describe conventional education as full slavery, there are some points of resemblance which I think are interesting to point out. For example, children in schools are forced to obey the authority of staff and adults in the school, bearing no consideration as to whether the instructions are right or wrong. Having been through conventional education myself, this is something which is always drilled into pupils from start throughout. Follow all instructions from adults. If an adult tells you to do something, you must do it. Questioning is branded as answering back, and this is naughty and in their eyes warrants punishment. Therefore, there is a strong emphasis on obedience in conventional education, one which seems to defeat one of the purposes of education as it is packaged, to give young people critical thinking abilities. Conventional education does quite the opposite. Another component of this definition is being forced to work in the interests of somebody else. Children in school are forced to work, that is true. But whose interests is it in? My personal opinion is that it is more in the interests of the state than the individual. Although, of course, there is some individual benefit, the balance of it leads me to believe that it serves the interests of the state and politicians more than pupils. Here in England, our exam system was overhauled a few years ago to become more rigorous. The government was always concerned with international leagues tables and an unsubstantiated obsession with driving up educational standards at home. By forcing me to work towards these tougher qualifications, they were producing propaganda to brag about internationally and at home during elections. Therefore, I believe that conventional education is indeed working in the interest of someone else, making it similar to slavery. In conclusion, I don't think we can use the term slavery to describe conventional education because students are not legally owned by the state. However, it does bear some resemblance to other aspects of the definition. First, it involves obeying other people. Secondly, it is, and I firmly believe, working in someone else's interests. You could argue, therefore, that conventional education is 2/3 slavery, but due to the sensitive nature of the word, unless it was 100%, then you may want to avoid using that term. Although it is greater than 50%, so perhaps there is a way you could argue the case for it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Andrew. So what I'm also going to do between each person speaking is I'm going to briefly check that I've understood, which will also give everybody else a chance to take it in and make sure that everybody feels heard. So to try and get that in a nutshell, Andrew, my understanding is that you're saying that on the one hand, the state doesn't technically own the student, which is a critical part of the definition of slavery. However, the obedience to others and the working for other people's interests makes it possibly, in your mind, 2/3 slavery. You brought in quite an interesting perspective that hasn't been covered so far, which is about the state using students to drive up league tables to produce propaganda for political purposes. So there's not only an economic benefit that isn't to the pupil, but you feel that because it's such a sensitive topic, you tend towards it should be 100% slavery before using the terms, although you feel that although it is kind of greater than 50% accurate, maybe it can be considered. So it sounds like at the moment, I'm thinking you're not clearly, definitely saying yes or no to the consent. You're arguing a little in both directions, but you're tending towards the no.
Yeah, that's very well summarized, yes.
Okay, I haven't missed anything important.
No, that's very good. Very good.
Great. Okay, who would like to go next?
I can.
Lovely.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to refer to the original meaning of student. It comes from the Latin word studere. If I pronounce it correctly, I'm not sure, but sorry for that if it is wrong. It means applying yourself to something. And also it has a relation with another Latin word. It is studium. It means a painstaking application. So exactly what students do always is painstaking application, and a painstaking application which is not rewarded. Students are always in the conventional educational system are forced to do something. They are always told not to do. So you should not run in the hallway. You mustn't be disrespectful, or saying that you have to complete your homework on time, you have to submit your work on time. So always they are told to what to do and what not to do. And also they are, although it is not in the state level, they are legally bound to their actions. If they break the rules, it is called as breaking the rules. If they break the rules, there can be some punishments. So they see the consequences of their actions, which is not in favor of the supported system that is forced in the general understanding. And also, I would like to also refer to the original meaning of the understanding of break time that we have in schools. So break time, it means the split in a period of work. So there is a work, a labor here that students do at school so that they have break time in between the lessons. But their labor is not rewarded. It is ignored. It is completely hidden. It is acted that they have to do it. So everything in a perception of the school system that students have to do it. So it is normal for them, their actions. It should not be rewarded because it is how it should be. This is normal, but actually there's a work, there's stress, they get depressed, but these are all ignored. And also we have the understanding of homework, where home should be the comfort zone of each individual, but they are giving homework. So they are still not free apart from the school building. Also, although in certain like conventional schools, postmodern system, they claim that they're not using it, but there's an understanding of uniform. So every and each individual is forced to wear in the same way. So in the clothing sense also, and they are being given numbers on the list so that they are being recognized by numbers, not with their names, even directly sometimes. And also on the school walls, I just would like to refer back to the rules and orders. On the school walls, you always see what to do and what not to do. So it is also mentally controlling your way of thinking. And lastly, I would like to refer to the original meaning of school, where it should be leisure, lecture, and philosophy place. But unfortunately, in the conventional and traditional school system, it is not a place that students love the knowledge or enjoy their free time, but it is only the time where they do whatever is being told to them. So what is my opinion is the need to discuss this, whether we should use the term slavery in education or not. It is derived from the lack of terminology in the way that we criticize the traditional educational system. Although I think that we should find a new terminology regarding how complex and also sensitive the term is, we need to find a new terminology, but still, until we come to that point, I consent to the use of slavery in the educational system to criticize the conventional education. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, some very interesting points there. So just to be sure I've understood you, you were saying that if you look at the original definitions of the words, I just want to clarify one thing. You were saying that it means to apply yourself to something with a painstaking application which is not rewarded. But in coercive education, students are forced to do and forced not to do, which means that it isn't their own application. It's actually coming from someone else, right? Okay, and then you were also saying that although studies are in themselves not rewarded, and that's normal, these other concepts show us what's really going on, that the fact that there is a break time means that what happens between those break times is actually work, but that work is not rewarded. Then you were saying that there were other aspects, very authoritarian aspects there, like uniforms, numbers instead of names, and all of these other ways that control the thinking. Maybe, that kind of concept of mental slavery. But on the other hand, then also, again, the original meaning of the word school is meant to be leisure, lectures, and philosophy, something that is actually engaging for the whole person, whereas what you're seeing is just obedience. Mm-hmm. However, while you feel that this terminology is too sensitive and maybe not appropriate, we're really lacking appropriate words. So while we work towards getting better words, you would provisionally consent to this terminology so that we can focus on the problem that's really going on rather than not discussing it. But your preference would be for us to find other words that would actually be more effective so that we could also avoid triggering people's sensitivities around the use of these words. Have I understood you?
Yes, very well. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much. Who would like to go next?
I'll go next.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that anytime anything is described or related to slavery, immediately points out how bad or ineffective or abusive it is. It can be work or school or whatever. Although in the context of school, it becomes even worse because people are in school for the most developmentally crucial years in their lives. What experiences they have in their teens and below affect their entire lives. So it's scary to think that people feel like slaves at such a time in their lives because of something like school. Also, school represents education. People may not tend to educate themselves later in their lives because of their experiences of education in the past. And if you have a huge majority of the population disliking education, then there's a huge opportunity for manipulation or for anarchy. Yeah, those are my thoughts on slavery in the context of education. So yeah, that's all I have to say.
That's all you have to say, which is actually a lot in very concise form. To check that I've understood you, you're saying that the advantage of using terms like slavery really focuses people on the severity of the problem, how severe it is, how bad and detrimental it is, and that's a useful reason to use it. You feel that it is particularly severe because this is something that's happening to young people while they are growing and learning. So it's kind of shaping their minds. And this can actually also lead people to go off education and not go into a lifelong learning pattern. And an interesting point that you make there is that actually leaves those people open to being manipulated later, or not having effective ways to sort of when I think you say anarchy, probably I'm guessing you mean to not be empowered actually. So it seems to me that you're implying that there's also a kind of an enslaved mentality that results from school. Am I saying more than you've said, or do you feel that I've heard you there?
Yes, you do understand what I'm saying, yes.
Great. Thank you. Who would like to go next?
I can go next. Okay, so first of all, I would like to say that my perspective does not include all education system, but more of a general perspective about common education systems. So my answer to the question of whether or not should we use the word slavery to describe education system is yes. And to justify why, I would like to point to one of the definition of the word slavery. And the definition is that an excessive dependence or devotion to something. So with what's currently happening in education system is that students have to go in the same process, either or not they want. We wake up at 6 a.m. or 8 a.m. depending on the country. We go through the same school day, and we have to go through the same process, whether or not we want. And that's in fact the opposite of what education is for, because one of the definition for education is an enlightening experience, and that used to happen in previous ages, the early ages, when people used to travel to get education from someone in another country, or find their own teacher and willingly taking educational experiences instead of now attending the same experiences because they need to get a better job or to get other things they need in life. So education has changed from being an enlightening experience to being a devotion or slavery. And if the word slavery is being, some people being sensitive about the word, what we can do is that we can find other words instead of the word slavery, but with the common given words on what we have. Slavery is the best word that can describe the situation. So my answer is yes, we should use it. And if we want to find a solution for what this word goes to other people, we should find a replacement word, add another word to the language. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ahmed. So you brought out another aspect there in terms of that kind of dependency on something that, originally education meant finding a kind of enlightenment that was very active. You had to go out and find your teacher, find your path, whereas now you're kind of forced into the standardization that isn't active anymore. It's all sort of whether you want to or not, and against your initiative. And you're saying that for those reasons you feel that slavery is the best word that we have at the moment to describe that kind of lack of self, what's the word, self-mastery, in the sense of students are not masters of their own lives. But you would prefer to find other words because it is a sensitive thing for people, but until then you would consent to it. Have I understood you, and have I put words in your mouth, or where are we?
Yes, that's exactly what I said. Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, who would like to go next?
I'll go next. So I wanted to start again by giving the definition of slavery, which is the state, slavery and enslavement, the state and condition of being a slave, someone forbidden to quit their service for another person, which is a slave, while treated as property. So I don't think it applies to children, or if it would apply to children, then this would mean that parents are slavers, because parents send their children to school, and also all schools and staff would be slavers too, in this kind of sense, in this kind of comparison. So for me, I would not consent to use this term. Firstly, as someone from the Caribbean, because slavery is a history of violence, physical and mental violence, that we can still feel nowadays. I can still feel it when I go back. There is still something that's very wrong in what happened during that time. So because this term is so general when it describes different forms of slavery, apparently at the moment there is some kind of debate about how to use this. Can we use this term or not? I wasn't even aware of that. But just if we want to have a unified education revolution movement, I think if we start using terms that may divide people, I don't think, even if we give consent, lots of people around the world, if they hear that we use this term, maybe they won't even listen to everything else that we say, which might be very interesting, very good for the education, for the people, for respect. So just, to unify this revolution movement, because it's such a sensitive term, I think we could find a different term maybe, or use oppression, or use robotization, or any other term that will show what has been described very well so far. And also I work in schools, so I see many different types of schools, and I work with many different types of people, and there are amazing teachers and amazing assistants and amazing people sacrificing their lives, working in schools where they're not treated well, or maybe some head teachers as well not being treated well. So it's a kind of hierarchy. Yeah, it's a kind of pyramidal thing. And I think the main issue is like fear. Yeah, anyway. And what else did I want to, sorry, I have to bring my paper. Yeah, I think that we have to, that would be nice to work together with all the education system, because there are lots of people in the education system who want to change it from inside out. But using slavery would put them in a place of a slaver, or would be a judgment for all the people who are doing their best to change the children's life. And some children in schools have a right to say what they don't like, and they are listened to, but not in all the schools, not by all the individuals. And it's something I think we can do only as a team with the community and the society and the parents and the carers and the schools. But saying school slavery would maybe judge some people who would just stop listening to whatever we want to share. Or, yeah. So I think that's it. I can't hear you.
Okay, sorry. I don't know how I got to be muted. Let me check if I've understood you. So you're saying that the definition that you're focusing on is that somebody is forbidden to quit the service of somebody else or is treated as property. And you're pointing out that that would make parents the primary slavers if children were slaves, and all school staff would also be seen as slaves. And you've got a very strong concern there in that you feel that it's very important that we work together as a community involving everybody, and using those words is automatically judgmental of many of the people that we need to have in the education revolution. And that if we want to have a united revolution, we need to be thinking carefully about alienating people in that way, especially because for people like yourself who have actually got that ancestry, which was incredibly brutal, these words are also very triggering on that level. So there's like two levels that you're saying no. The one is because of the sensitivity and the associations that make it kind of an inappropriate phrase to use, and the other is about wanting to unite everybody to bring around transformation without judging and alienating people, because many of them are really wonderful people who don't deserve that and who actually could also join in on our side. And then you've made some suggestions for alternative words, which I'm just going to table for a later round, because we'll look at those later. Have I missed anything important or misunderstood you in any way?
No, I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, we've got a couple of people left. Who would like to go next?
I could go next.
Okay, thank you.
So I've used this word before because I felt it describes the experience people have in school very well. Students have to do things mandated by the system, and these things are not necessarily helping them in their development. So they are basically working for the system's needs and not theirs. And I also think that this experience in school makes kids get used to spending most of their time doing things they don't necessarily like. And this is why there are so many adults that are unhappy because they don't like their job, but they don't change their lives either because they feel disempowered, because they've been told so many times in school that they are not good enough. This system also teaches young people to be a more powerful person and to not have a choice and a voice in the rulemaking. So it doesn't teach democratic governance, which is also something that might make the school experience similar to slavery. There are a lot of arguments for using these words. However, I'm now pretty neutral and I'm not using that word anymore because there has been an opposition from some people to using this word because of its historical weight. And I acknowledge everything that has happened before and that is still happening in the world. And I don't want to disrespect anyone or divide people in the education revolution, like Yelene said. So I am open to the idea of giving a new use to this word, but if we don't agree to use this word in the educational context, I would like to find an alternative word that works the same to describe the school experience.
Right. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you used to use it because you feel that students are working for a system's benefit rather than for their own benefit, being told what to do and being trained in obedience and not having a voice. And that the impact of that is also that that doesn't teach or support democratic governance, and it trains people into doing things in a disempowered way, even in adult life, where they continue to accept work situations that actually aren't acceptable to them because of the way that the system has trained them. However, you've recently stopped using the word because you've become aware that it's a very sensitive word and you don't want to disrespect anyone or alienate anyone. But you do feel strongly about finding words that still do the same job. Have I understood you there?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, we've got 2 participants left. Who would like to go next?
I think I'm ready.
Great. Go for it.
So, firstly, I'd say that I would consent to just prima facie, I consent to people using the term slavery in ways that they feel are appropriate for themselves to use it. And I don't feel like I can stop or propose that some people have more right to that term than others. But I think the first thing that comes to mind for me with the term slavery in this context is that we're not talking about the metaphor of slavery. So slavery is used lightheartedly in cases of like being a slave to fashion. And I just want to be crystal clear that that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about actually referring to the experience of feeling enslaved. And to me, the primary piece of that is a matter of will, and your will being subverted by someone who has control over you in some way, whether that's financial, whether that's physical. When your will is subverted by someone else who has a means of controlling you, you're starting down the road of enslavement, right? So for me, I don't currently believe that most schools rise to the level that I would use the term slavery, but that doesn't mean that I think others don't have a different experience to that. My concern is that when it's used in a hyperbolic way, when it's used in a setting where people don't have the context and they just see the headline of the term school slavery, there's an immediate revulsion and an assumption that this is someone using it with hyperbole and they're not taking it seriously, and it diminishes the credibility of the speaker. So I wouldn't lead like we have with this session, with slavery in the title, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't use the term when it's appropriate, especially when we're talking about how will is being subverted. I think slavery, whether it's economically profitable or not. And so there's been some conversation around the economics of slavery. Also, similarly, I don't think people's self-description, even in the days of the American slave trade, there was a conversation that somehow people felt like they were doing the right thing and they were making the slaves' lives better. So there's a whole notion of intentionality that the history will never get right, and that people in that moment probably couldn't even get right. And so I hate to use the economics or profitability or intentions as some bar that we have to clear in order to call it slavery. I don't think that that bar needs to be cleared. Not all cultures experience slavery the same way throughout the millennia, and so to try and pull any one definition is also problematic. My hope is that any person who has experienced a form of slavery would be open to anyone else who's experienced any form of slavery to describe it and express it in their own terms without feeling diminished. There's no race to prove that someone has experienced more enslavement or worse enslavement. Amongst those who have had their will stripped from them, I would hope that there would be a unity in hearing the real experience of anyone else who feels they've experienced that. And again, we're not talking about the hyperbole, we're talking about the people who actually feel like their will has been subverted through some other form of authority. But we shouldn't be trying to compare on the basis of degree and whether or not something rises to the level of being called slavery in my initial thought. There's a metaphor that I'll use here that isn't completely perfect, but in the world of accounting, there's the notion of larceny, which is having access to funds and using them for inappropriate purposes, like if you run the school and you use some of the funds to make your car payment or something like that. And then there's the notion of embezzlement, which is not just misusing those funds, but then trying to hide it. I think a big chunk of what goes wrong in our conversation around slavery is that there was a period of time in different cultures where we didn't even try and hide it. And yet my inner sense says that when you try and hide it, you actually make it worse for that person. So I want to make sure that we don't stop discussing things as slavery because they're harder to see, because they're better hidden. And so that's one of the reasons why I would support using the term, even if it's not as clear or not as obvious to the folks who aren't experiencing that, form of will being taken. Yeah, so I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay. I'm very grateful that I have the ability to type notes. Let me see if I can get into the heart of that. So it sounds like at the crux of what you're saying is that you respect people's rights to describe their experience in ways that make sense to them. And you would hope for that as a culture, that people would have a compassion and a unity that wouldn't lead them to dictate to each other what words are okay to use, that it not become a competition around who has suffered enough to be able to use a particular word. Also because there really isn't any kind of single objective way that we can determine whether a word is appropriate to use or not. Even in blatant transatlantic slavery, we had slave owners trying to, or, imagining for themselves that it wasn't what it was. So from that perspective, you are also concerned that if we simply stop using the words, we could be going into a kind of denial that would actually make the crime worse by hiding it and denying it. But at the same time, you don't generally feel personally that the general school experience really fits the term. But in a sense, you're keeping your mind open as a kind of positive agnostic. You're not pronouncing on that one. I think I've probably missed something.
I would clarify by saying I don't see it, but I don't deny that it may be there.
Great. That's a very nice summation. Thank you. Okay, who would like to go next? Oh, there's just Christy, and then we have one recorded participant. Christy, are you feeling ready?
Heavy topic. Gotta brush it off first. All right. So, my opinion is, when you hear the word slavery, the first thing that comes to your mind would be, as what Yolene mentioned, the violence, the oppression, and as such, I personally believe that it shouldn't be used in the context of education because the meaning of it is kind of distorted. Like, for example, when a person says social media slavery, what they actually mean is social media addiction. And when they use that word, it has such a negative connotation to it. It has its own historical value and has sensitive meaning to the people that are around us because we don't know what perception they may have. And in the education at the moment for conventional schools, I don't think slavery is a good word for it. I think a better word would be adult centrism in education. It's whereby the adults in the conventional school system feels like the children needs them and they know what's best. It's a bias that adults in the education system would have, the conventional education system would have, whereby they feel that the children needs them and they shouldn't be given the freedom because adults know best. So in conclusion, my heart's telling me that I wouldn't consent to it because I believe that we have to be mindful of the people around us and be respectful of others' life experiences and how that word may have a different meaning to other people if we take it too lightly and just use the word as it is. So, yes.
Right. Thank you very much. So your heart just says no. The first thing that comes to your mind when you hear those words is that violence and oppression that you don't see in a school environment. And a lot of people are very sensitive to these words and could feel disrespected by these words being just taken too lightly and not given the respect and treated with the gravity that it deserves. And you've also made a suggestion for some alternative words, which I've just noted there for the later round, but you do feel that it's very important to focus on the fact that there is adult centrism and bias against children having freedom and responsibility in education, and that is something important to highlight. Have I understood you?
Yep, crystal clear.
Okay. Then we've got one more participant for only this round because she wasn't able to be here in person. So she won't be able to join in the later rounds and interact and respond, but she did feel strongly that she wanted her voice to be heard on this topic. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen again to, here we go, share screen, computer sound, and
hi, my name is Dr. Nika Prather, and I'm here to support.
Oops, sorry. Let's try that again. Sorry about that. Looks like we got an advert and a speed bomb. Hang on one sec. Let's just get it back here. Apologies for the pause. Okay, this should work better now. Share screen, share computer sound, and here we go.
Hi, my name is Dr. Nika Prather, and I'm here to support the whole concept of traditional schooling being seen as slavery. I definitely feel that as a Black woman. I actually give talks on this where I look at traditional schooling as slavery by another name. The way a lot of times traditional schooling is about indoctrination and making people think and be a certain way based on whoever's in authority. And so when it came time for me to educate my children with my background with racism and my understanding of slavery and my understanding of the history of the ending of slavery and how schools were used to promote the concept of white supremacy, I really wanted to choose a school for my kids that was the exact opposite of that. So that's why I was really drawn. I'm at a restaurant. That's why I was really drawn to democratic schools, Sudbury schools, not even schools that claim to be more free thinking, but schools that really were about democracy, about freedom, about students making their own choice, finding their own path, being completely free. Because when slavery ended in America and our people had to go into the schools, they went right back on the plantation, in my opinion. So yes, absolutely. Traditional schooling is like slavery to me.
Okay. So now we will be going into the second round. Now the second round is very short and sweet and simple. It's simply if you have any questions or clarifications for somebody else. So we're not going to be talking about what other people said or how it struck you or so on. It's more, is there something that you need to clarify before we go on to the next round where you can actually give those responses and further thoughts. So I'm just going to go through the order briefly and check whether anybody has. So let me just get back to my notes there. Okay. Andrew, was there anything you needed to ask or clarify with anybody?
Yes, please. Could I ask Selva to clarify whether at this point she does or does not consent to the use of the term slavery to describe conventional education?
Selva, would you like to respond?
Yeah. Oh my God, it's very difficult. I don't know. I'm like 50-50. What I've been thinking in this time is that traditional schooling has similarities with slavery, but it's not slavery. So maybe we could say traditional schooling is kind of similar to slavery, but I'm thinking we should not say it's slavery because it's not. But I don't know if I will give consent or not in the consent round. I'm still thinking about it.
Okay. Andrew, was there anything else you wanted to clarify with anyone else?
No, thanks.
Okay. Then the next person is Leila. Do you have anything you wanted to ask or clarify?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Then the next person is Neil. Do you have anything that you want to clarify with anybody?
I don't either. Thank you.
Okay. Then Ahmed, do you have anybody that you want to ask something?
No, I think everyone was very clear with their perspective, so thank you.
Okay. Yolene, do you have any clarifications that you need to ask for?
No, thank you.
Okay. Selva, anything from you?
I just wanted to ask Greg, because your comment was pretty complex to me. So I would like to ask if you would use it yourself, just yes or no.
The answer is no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and Greg, while you're unmuted, do you have anything to ask?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. I think I am down to Christy.
Okay.
Okay. Have I missed anybody? Or is that everybody? I'm just making sure that I've got the order clear for the next round. Okay. And then just to clarify that Annika did know she was making this video for the session, and that it would be used in the way that it's being used. Okay, so then let's go on to round 3. So in round 3, we're going to be having an opportunity to respond to other people. You can also, bring in something else that's come to mind as a result of, reflecting on this and listening. So yeah, as Salva's got it here, what struck me, what stood out for me, or how has my mind actually changed or my thinking evolved or expanded as a result of listening to everybody else. And then after that, we'll be doing the consent round. So let's just check the time quickly. The time is, it's quite tight, actually, because we had a late start and we need to be out of here in 10 minutes. So let's try to keep it fairly brief. And again, starting with Andrew. I think I'll skip on the reflections now. Let's just go through the participants. Andrew, go for it.
Can I just say, Jana, before you move on, I don't think anything else is happening in the conference at 2:30. Certainly this room isn't being used, so we might potentially all agree to stay longer if we can.
If that is definitely the case, because I don't have a way to confirm that, is that for sure, or do we need to double check it?
The thing happening is at 3 o'clock.
Okay. All right, then let's still try and keep it fairly brief, but let's not panic then. Thank you very much, Stephanie. That's handy. Okay, sorry for the interruption, Andrew.
Absolutely fine. Well done, everybody, on your opening statements. It was very enlightening. It was good to see some new perspectives. I think Layla's was quite interesting because she emphasised how rarely student labour is rewarded and how heavily binded they are. Neil made a good point relating to how influenceable young people are at such a young age during the school years, and Salva's point about what that can do later on in regards to staying in a job you don't like was also quite interesting. Ahmed highlighted how extreme the school routine actually is. Getting up at 6 a.m. every morning for many years is actually quite extreme. Your lens was quite interesting because when I was writing mine, I was considering how the term might land on the ears of Afro-Caribbeans given the history. And I was interested to hear that Yolene had other alternative terms to recommend. Greg made some good points in regards to maybe not wanting to use it yourself, but definitely I could tolerate other people using it. When I wrote my perspective, I was just thinking, let's consider everyone as well, not just me. But Greg certainly made some interesting points. I interpreted at least about freedom of speech, and also the fact that if we don't use the blunt terminology, people may forget how bad the situation actually is. Christy was on a page quite similar to myself. We should consider how it would land on the ears of everybody, and we want to sort of make an inclusive education revolution. And Anika's recorded statement also caught my attention in particular, because Anika also she took quite a different perspective on it to Yolene, and it sort of taught me that perhaps within the Afro-Caribbean community, there isn't one united perspective on this. There are alternative ways of viewing it, and that was really interesting and I think quite important to consider both Anika and Yolen's arguments in that respect.
Thank you. And I've just, next is Leila.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to also thank you to everyone because their perspective was really enlightening. And after Yolen's historical reference, I still it made my point in thinking that the issue is really sensitive and we should be careful about in deciding whether we should use it or not. But after listening to everybody else, Andrew, Selva, Greg, Christy, Neil, and Ahmed, and also the participant that sent the video, I still do think that until we find a suitable and proper way to define how students are treated in the traditional education system, I still do think that we can use the terminology slavery. And I really thank everyone who made their points because it was really, really opening the discussion and guiding it to different perspectives and enlightening. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And the next person is Neil.
Yeah, I really liked everyone's input to the discussion as well. For me, what really got me was everyone's different perspectives on it. Some focused on the word itself and kind of the social aspects that come to using the word. Some looked at how some staff members of schools would kind of react towards the situation. Some looked at the impact on the students. So yeah, I enjoyed listening to everyone's perspective on it. And yeah, thank you everyone for your inputs.
And thank you for yours. Ahmed?
So I think Andrew said it all, but I just want to say that everyone's perspective was very enlightening. When I was preparing for the statement that I was saying, I just thought we have point A, point B. It's simple topic, but with what everyone said, I have found out that there's a lot in the topic than just point A and point B. There is just one thing that I wanna add. I just wanted to make sure of, but I want to add in terms of the use of the word slavery to describe education. And that's more directed to Yolen's point of view. So just to ensure, her point was about that slavery is quite a big word for education that's very sensitive to use. So I just wanted to ensure that, wanted to add that at some points of the word, education is very restrictive, that some people commit suicide due to how restrictive it is in Japan and India, some place in India. So yeah, I just wanted to add this point. And I want to say that everyone's point of view was very enlightening. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Ahmed. Yolen?
Yes, thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts, and it's interesting to hear many different thoughts and point of view. I like when Christy said that the meaning of slavery was a bit of a distorted one, which makes it so sensitive to use, and I do agree with that in a sense. And also about the punishment and the rewards. There are rewards in school. They are rewarded, even though I feel deep inside it should be abolished, but this is a different topic. It's not linked to that. It feels like a very political talk, it feels like it's not only about using the term slavery, it's describing much more of the world as it is right now and how everyone obeys, because it's not just the children obeying, it's just the adults. And yeah, it's most of the population is obeying. Little by little, you can see that people don't want to obey anymore. But I don't know. Yeah, it's very, very political. And I feel, okay, the word slavery is very strong to show how hard it is, but it might also divide a lot. And all the people I spoke to using this terminology in education didn't understand why using this terminology. And they were French people, white and black. They just didn't understand why using this terminology. They had brainwashing and robotization and oppression, but not this one. And yeah, it could feel a bit like Matrix. You take the blue pill or the red pill, but it's much deeper, and there are so many different layers that yeah, I don't know. But it was great to hear all of you, and I just learned so much as well. So thank you very much for sharing. Yeah.
Thank you. And next is Salva.
Hi. Well, so I'm trying to think really hard, because on one side, I really want to get the attention and give the power, like, okay, the education system is not working. So I really want people to know that. And for that, I need a word. But I don't want, under any circumstance, to offend people or make them feel bad. So I think, yeah, because not everyone is going to watch this and think and understand us, our perspective. And I still don't want to offend people. So as Yolene said, some people, you talked about this with other people and they didn't understand why. And I don't want to make this confusion for people. So what I'm thinking now, I want to ask if you think it would be correct to say that traditional schooling has some similarities to slavery, because I think that's true. And it's not completely true that school is slavery, completely slavery, as Andrew said. It's like 50% maybe or something like that. So yeah, I think we should think of a new word for that. That's it.
Okay, thank you. And Greg?
I think Anita's video, it was Anita, I'm terrible with names, was probably the most hard to shake out of my brain as those words ran through, because it's so counterintuitive to what I would have expected. And so for me, the notion, the reality that the system was distorted to the point where even when the system tries to self-correct itself, the system is still used to continue the subversion of will, in terms of, you know, what the schools were after slavery was formally ended, is just a constant reminder that, to me, and that's the hardest part of this whole thing, is we're not dealing with one moment in time and you know, one decision is made and things are fixed. It's dealing with this spectrum and dealing with this evolving system that reinforces itself in good ways and in terrible ways. And so to me, that's the part that I think is the hardest for me to use the term slavery, knowing that it's not just that moment of slavery that we picture in textbooks. It's the whole systematic piece, both in the short term and in the long term, that we need to deal with. And we can't encapsulate that in a single word. So I agree with the idea that all of us coming up with better vocabulary but avoiding using terms just for the point of shock, like the radio shock jocks that try and get people to listen by throwing an extreme word at something. To me, the subversion of will is really the core piece, but there were a lot of other great terms here today that we would want in that diaspora of how we discuss what school does to people.
Thank you. And finally, Christy.
I'd like to thank everyone for sharing their opinions and point of view. It was certainly very enlightening. Andrew and Greg mentioned a bit about the economics of things and some accounting analogies, correct me if I'm wrong, which I never actually thought about. But how it actually changed my mind was that because I never thought about it, it was something that struck out. But the video by Anika, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's the right name, I noticed how she was all right using the word slavery, while Yolen, I believe Yolen and I, we had that gut feeling that it's not right because, well, at the end of the day, as a researcher and educator, it's hard work, like, from your heart. And we're trying to create a democratic and inclusive environment for not just for ourselves, but for the children and the parents and their community. So, yeah.
Okay. So to just briefly, as we go towards the consent round, just highlight two different feelings that are coming through here as two of the positions, is that we need words that don't trivialize the school experience, that make it clear that there is serious harm. Although the people who hold that perspective are somewhat open to having replacement words, they feel strongly that those words need to work effectively. And there seems to be a little bit of feeling on that side that maybe the other side is not actually acknowledging the level of harm that children are experiencing in school, and that not using the words might allow people to continue to take school too lightly. Coercive school. We're talking specifically about coercive school. On the other hand, the other trend seems to be saying that there maybe isn't enough accuracy, enough of a fit for these words to be useful. And on top of that, they're extremely triggering words. And the alienation and the feeling of being judged just completely outweighs the benefit of using the words for the value of trying to get people to take it more seriously. Those feel to me to be the two main trends that have still not come together. We're going to check that now with a consent round. I'm going to propose that since a consent round is very quick, you're just saying yes or no, that we do two quick consent rounds, one for I consent to these words being used, and I consent to these words being dropped. Let's just check both of those consent rounds. And I'm predicting that neither of them will be unanimous. So I'm predicting that we're going to go on to round 5, which is suggestions for alternative words to see if we can find something that everyone will consent to. So Salva's just reminded us there that this is not about saying I vote for this thing, I choose this thing. The consent also means, yeah, okay, I could live with this, or no, this is outside of my range of tolerance. It's not something that I'm okay with. So let's go briefly through the round. And if you just say, we said we were going to put this up on the whiteboard so people know exactly what they are saying yes or no to. So first we're going to do a consent round on I consent to the use of the words slave and slavery in the context of coercive school experience. Yes or no? Okay, then Andrew, yes or no?
No.
Leila?
Yes.
Neil?
Yes.
Ahmed?
Yes.
Yolen?
No.
Salva?
No.
Greg?
Yes.
Christy? Christy?
No, I don't consent. Sorry.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going back to the screen, but we are going to now say, I consent to dropping these words for this purpose. Yes or no? Andrew?
Yes.
Leila?
No.
Neil?
Yes.
Ahmed?
No.
Yolen?
Sorry, just clarification. Dropping means not using them anymore.
Yes, that's correct.
No.
Salva?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Christy?
Yes.
Okay, so whichever way we look at it, we have slightly different responses, which is interesting in that some people don't consent to using the words and also don't consent to dropping them. So let's have a look at what other words we might be able to use. We are going to do this briefly because it's getting very long and late. Salva?
I think, well, I just wanted to say there's a pad, like we could write there the words we that come to our mind. I can, if that's a good idea, I can put it here and we can all write there and see that what we write.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a good idea?
Yeah. So I've got it up. Are people able to write on it?
Yeah, I sent a link and they can just go in there and write there.
Oh, I see. I thought we could just use it on the whiteboard right here.
Yeah, like the one I sent, and then you can open that and share screen if you want, or just we can see at the same time when they write there.
Okay, so
and then I also wanted to say another thing. We might not find a word that already exists for this, and as the world evolves, new words come up. Maybe we have to come up with a new word. Recently, the people in Sweden came up with a new word called flick scum, which is being embarrassed of flying with airplanes because of the carbon emissions, which is a pretty new thing. So we might come up with a new word.
Okay, so we've already got a few here. Can everybody see the link? Is everybody able to add? If you're not, please feel free to give us dictation and we will write for you. Trying to just close these things. I'm going to suggest if you're not actively typing, please go to anything here that you do consent to and just put a C next to it.
Hi, Jana. I'm not sure, or Yana, I'm not
Yes.
sure how to write on the sheet.
Okay. If you should be able to, I think you have to follow the link in the chat first. Did you do that?
Yeah, so you first open the link, and
Okay.
then when you're there, it's just like a online document where you write, just type.
Okay, I'll find it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh my God.
Okay, if you feel strongly that anything on here is not appropriate and you do not consent to it, don't bother to put anything next to anything you feel neutral about or don't particularly love. But if there's anything that's really outside your consent zone, please put an N next to it. Salva is, I don't know who is doing this, but I'm thinking it might be nice for everybody present in the session to be able to join in at this point. What do you feel about that? If they're not already doing so?
To write in the document? Yeah.
Okay, so if you've been holding back because you're not a member of the panel, don't hold back anymore. Go for it. Feel free to put your C, put your N, put your new ideas.
Wait, what does the C and the N stand for again?
So C means you consent to this. N means no. It's like, it's not that it's actually outside of my consent circle. I do not want to see this term used.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
I think maybe after this we could do a round to like maybe, I don't know, discuss.
I personally feel the session is very long. I would not be very keen for a discussion round, but I would suggest a quick consent round to see, do people feel if we are using this whole palette of words, do we still need the term consent or not? And then we would leave it there, because as we know, we wouldn't necessarily reach universal consent on a big topic like this in a single session with a small number of people. But I'm willing to, it's within my zone of tolerance to go for more discussion if everybody wants to.
It's getting a bit late for me. So
yeah, we've been going for almost 2 hours.
Yeah.
Jana, I would also say that I think if there's further discussion, it might be just as fruitful to discuss the format that we've demonstrated today and the ability to take something this strong and discuss it in meaningful ways with people who showed up with potentially very, very different opinions, and bring people towards each other rather than, further dividing them as a lot of our other communications tools would. I think that's the more important part of wrapping up the conversation for me.
Great. Okay. Has everybody had a look and made sure that, especially now at this point, if there's anything that hasn't got an N next to it, if there's anything that only has C's and you really are not comfortable with it, please make sure you put an N next to it, because otherwise we're going to be assuming that everyone in this session, you might not be bothering to put a C, but you haven't put an N. So this will kind of be a record of the ones that are not okay with the people here.
I have a question. So the session is being recorded, right?
That's right.
So then will we be able to kind of get the recording so we can share it kind of with our own groups?
Yes. So AERO usually takes a little while to release the recordings.
Sure.
But once the recording is released, then I think Salva and I, as the facilitators, will receive the recording, which we are allowed to distribute to our own networks. I will certainly put it up on my YouTube channel publicly, and then make sure that you guys all get the link. Please make sure. Yeah, please make sure that I mean, Salva has the addresses of all of the panel, but if you're an audience member, please make sure that Salva or I has your email address.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Does anybody need more time, or can we wrap up with a quick consent round?
Can I just do one thing quickly?
Yeah.
Forgot to say that if children use the word slavery to describe how they feel in school, I don't mind. But it's more if adults who are aware of the term use it to describe it, then I would mind. But I don't mind people using, like, I won't feel offended. I just think it's not the most appropriate word. But I can't tell people what to use or not. Words have different meanings for everyone.
Okay, that's a useful distinction.
I'm not able to type anymore in the document. So if anyone else could type what Liz wrote in the chat.
Can you dictate it? Because I can't see the chat, then I'll type it. Mm-hmm.
The word is discoa. So DISCOOA.
Diso?
It's actually DISCCOA.
DIS?
CCOA.
Oh.
CCOA. Discoa.
Yeah.
What is that?
So it's a new word inspired by Selva. But it's also an acronym. I was looking at some of the most common words like disempowerment and disenfranchisement, etc. What else was I looking at? I didn't write them all down. Indoctrination, coercion, not coercive. There was the other C one I saw. Coercion, and I can't see the original board now. Anyway, and then oppression and authoritarian. But that was just an example of maybe looking at the many, many words and strong ideas and creating a new word like Selva suggested. And then, when we think of disco, we think of something fun and bright and joyful. And this would actually be the opposite. Just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Great. Okay. So let's do a quick consent round now. The proposal is that young people, but not adults, use the words slave or slavery, but generally we'll aim to use other terms on this page already, i.e. the words we've got on this page are already good enough, as opposed to we need to keep working on coming up with words that are strong enough to replace the word slave and slavery effectively. So we're just going to do this just with the participants. So a quick consent round. Do you consent that young people, but not adults, can use the word slave or slavery to describe their school experience, but we should generally aim to use other terms on this page? Andrew?
No, I don't think we should have one age group being able to use it and another not.
Okay.
Jana?
Leila, yes?
Sorry, I put something in the chat and I just would like to add it here because I know you couldn't see it. And that I was wondering, I would like to be able to use the term, but put into context and say, many young people in school are beginning to use the term slavery for the experience they're having in school. And wondering if that's okay for an adult to be saying, but also I don't want to muddy the waters of your incredibly good process here, which is so impressive.
So I think again, this cannot be prescriptive to anyone in the education revolution by definition. I think what we're trying to do here is, I think, primarily create a documentation for people to think about so that we can all carry on working collectively towards effective ways of expression that are unifying rather than divisive. So I'm going to call it and just carry on with the consent round on this sentence so that we can wrap up, if that's okay. So next will be, after Andrew, Leila.
I will say no.
Okay. Neil?
No.
Ahmed?
I would say yes at some cases. Like, only students should use it because they are the one in the situation. They are the one who has the experience, so they can use it to express what they are feeling or what's going on with them. But adults cannot, because that may be sensitive to other people because they are not in the experience. So yeah, like there are already some other words that are like, it's okay for people to use it in some groups and not in some groups. That's common. So I would say yes.
Thank you. Yolene?
It feels difficult now suddenly to respond. It was my own point of view, and I can't impose anything on anyone. And I see Greg's point. I'd say yes.
Okay, thank you. Salva?
You're sharing your screen.
I said it's so strange.
Oh, am I sharing the wrong screen?
I think so.
Sorry. Where are we? There. Young people, but not adults, to use the word slave or slavery, but generally aim to use other terms on this page.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna say yes because I've used it before and I didn't have any bad intention. So of course, if a younger person uses it, I'm not gonna say I don't consent. But of course, I'm gonna give other new words that we have now in this document.
Thank you. I'm not going to go back to my list because that's going to muddle up the screen share. So anyone who hasn't on the original panel given their consent or not, please do so now.
This is Greg. I would not consent to this as written.
Thank you.
I would not consent.
Thank you. Was that everybody? Okay, so Salva, if you got a copy of this this document that's up here. So I'd like to just suggest that maybe it can be shared with everybody and we can all carry on thinking about it and working on it. And apart from that, to share this recording with our communities, continue the discussions. And yeah, let's build unity and solidarity and look for ways to keep doing that for everyone concerned. And I just personally want to say thank you so much to everybody who's had the courage to show up and stick with it through this very long process. It's beautiful to be a part of a community that is so committed and determined to actually do right by everybody.